So I'm Emma, I'm 41, and I live in Southampton.
And can you tell me when you was first diagnosed?
So I was first diagnosed in June 2017, so coming up for 7 years ago.
Okay, and whereabouts was the mole?
So on my arm, so I had a very small, kind of oddly shaped mole on my top of my arm here, and turned out to be a 1B, grade 1B melanoma.
And then after you'd had it taken off, so you'd had the mole taken off,
Yeah.
came back in stage 1B,
Yeah.
you had a wider excision done?
Yep, so I had the wide local excision done, and then I had a lymph node biopsy as well, to just double check whether or not, because of how far the melanoma cells were identified in the skin layers, they wanted to double check that it hadn't spread to any lymph nodes, and I was very lucky that mine came back all clear.
Yeah, and where was the lymph node check?
Under my arm, yeah.
So if you
so,
have a mole on your arm here, the next lot would be underneath.
Yeah, so it's where the blood flow and the lymphatic flow would flow to next from that site, and that for me would have been under my arm.
How did you find the lymph node?
That was probably more painful actually than having the wide local excision because of where it is. It's under your arm. It's very sensitive. Obviously, wearing underwear and clothing rubs on it makes it quite uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. So how have you been? How are you now?
I'm absolutely fine. I'm now nearly 7 years clear. I've had no reoccurrences. I've had a couple of moles checked and removed, but thankfully they've all been clear. So
how do you feel after you've been diagnosed? Because life changes, right?
it massively changes. Yeah.
You've been diagnosed, and a lot of people think you just get on with your life.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me?
Well, I'm a mum. I've got two children, two boys, who are now in their teens, but at the time they were relatively young. So you start to think of worst case scenarios. I had friends around me at the time that were going through other cancers, so breast cancer and lots of other cancers. So you kind of see the impact that that's had. And also at the time I work in clinical research. So I worked at the time, well, not long before I was diagnosed, I worked on a children's cancer ward. So I saw the very worst that could happen to the most vulnerable people. So it was a bit of a weird one really. So from my side of things, obviously worrying about my family and how they might cope if anything, the worst case scenario happened, but also in the back of my mind I'm thinking it could be so much worse. I can't complain, because these poor people, these poor children that I've seen and worked with have been through hell, as has their families. So actually in comparison, I'm just having an operation and then I can just get on with my life. I haven't got to go through chemotherapy and radiotherapy or immunotherapy or any of that horrible treatment that then impacts you for such a long time. So from my side of things, it was a real mixed bag of how I approached it. But I took a lot of inspiration from a very dear friend of mine who had breast cancer and did a huge amount of campaigning for Copperfield, and a lot of those charities raised a huge amount of awareness, posted lots of things on social media about it, and as a result of that, another dear friend of ours then identified a lump in her breast, which turned out to be breast cancer as well, and that was only achieved because of my other friend putting stuff out there. So the power of putting stuff out there really resonated with me, and I thought I can't just sit back and say nothing. If my message can then reach other people and then somebody else then goes and gets that mole checked, then it really does. And I wish, because I wasn't aware that the mole that I had on my arm was anything to be concerned about. It was just a mole. I've got hundreds of them. A whole family have got hundreds of them. It's not something I'm aware of. There's no family history of it. There's nothing.
It's just not enough awareness at the moment for it, and then I think the only people that get checked at the moment, I think, is because you're seeing something on the internet that would trigger you to go, actually, I need to get that mole checked.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was only checked because I was sat in a meeting with a doctor and I had a short sleeve top on like this, and he said, that mole doesn't look right, you might want to get that checked.
Wow.
And it was only through him saying that I got it checked and I got my diagnosis. I may well be sat here today with a much worse diagnosis if I hadn't got it checked when he mentioned it.
So, what tips would you give to anyone else? Well, let's do it from this point of view. So, obviously, you've been diagnosed. You're 7 years in, which is actually amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
time's a healer. I know that myself. But at the beginning, it's actually really, really scary.
Terrifying,
you deal with a lot of mental side of this as well.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't see that. I think that you had the mole taken off and it's gone. There's a mental side to this that
huge.
People don't talk
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
What tips would you give to anyone newly diagnosed?
Talk about it.
Get it out. Yeah.
Talk about it to your friends and family. Tell them how it makes you feel. Even if they make you think it's just a mole, you've just had surgery. Tell them, no, it's more than that. You know, this impacts your whole life. I'm now terrified to go out in the sun. I'm now terrified that my children go out in the sun. I've got 2 very active boys who play sports, and I'm terrified about them being out in the sun without any protection on.
And be open about
it. Be open about it. Tell people, bang that drum.
Yeah, no, definitely, I agree, and that's how I think I've dealt with it at the beginning as well, is by talking to people.
Yeah.
That brings me on to the next question. How did you find people around you?
Again, mixed bag. I work in healthcare, so I think the people that I worked with were brilliant. They were very understanding. They worked with people that had had similar diagnoses. There were other people in my life that didn't know what to say, so didn't say anything, and that came across as like they didn't care, which potentially wasn't the case, but that's how it makes you feel. And then you have those amazing people in your life who are there for you no matter what, and listen to you cry, and even if they're going through a shit time themselves, they do that.
That's lovely, isn't it? Yeah.
100%,
you just want that understanding of, okay, especially at the early stages. I haven't had chemo, I haven't had... Even for me, I haven't had a lymph node check, but it still doesn't mean I don't do anything towards it, you know.
This is it.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good to talk, I think, and that's the main thing. Most people at the beginning don't feel that they can.
Yes.
It's who do I talk to, which is why the community of what we've got now, I think, is so good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else you want to add?
I just want to thank you really for giving me the opportunity for banging that drum again.